beggar girl says 3 words and makes the passing millionaire burst into tears. Michael Thompson hurried through Union Square as he had every morning for the past 3 years, his firm steps echoing on the cobblestones while he checked messages on his phone. At 42, the owner of a mid-sized construction company had built a rigid routine to avoid thinking, feeling, or remembering the emptiness in his chest since losing the most precious thing in his life. The girl in a worn grey cap appeared before him like a ghost from the past. She wore a faded, dirty beige blouse, a patched brown skirt that had once been another color, and on her small feet were battered flip-flops barely holding together. Her brown hair escaped in unruly strands beneath the cap, framing a thin face marked by suffering but still holding a childlike sweetness in her almond-shaped eyes. "Please, sir, can you spare a quarter so I can buy some bread?" Her voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. Michael looked up from his phone impatiently, ready to walk past without a glance, as he always did with the square's beggars, but something in those brown eyes made him hesitate for a split second. The girl stretched out her small, dirty hands toward him, a gesture he'd seen 1,000 times, yet now it carried a different weight. "I don't have any change," he replied curtly, trying to step around her. Then she spoke the 3 words that shattered his world. "Daddy, it's me." Michael's phone slipped from his hands, the sound of it shattering on the ground, echoing through the square as his legs went weak. His chest tightened as if someone had sucked all the air from his lungs. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking as uncontrollable sobs escaped his throat. "No, it can't be," he murmured between his fingers, his voice choked. The girl stepped closer, her big eyes fixed on the man crumbling before her. With one small hand, she lightly touched his arm, the same tender gesture she'd made at just 7 years old, comforting him after a hard day at work. "Dad, why are you crying?" she asked with the same sweetness as before, as if the 5 years apart had been just a bad dream. Michael lifted his face slowly, tears blurring his vision. When his eyes finally focused on the thin face before him, a wave of recognition and pain hit him with devastating force. There stood Emily, his daughter, but no longer the chubby, smiling child he'd known. This was a 12-year-old girl, too thin, her face marked by hardship, her clothes looking like they'd been pulled from the trash. "Em?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "My little girl." She nodded, a timid smile tugging at her cracked lips. Around them, the morning square began to stir as curious onlookers stopped to watch. An elderly flower vendor nearby stepped closer, intrigued by the unfolding scene. "Is it really you?" Michael reached a trembling hand toward his daughter's face, but hesitated before touching her, as if afraid she'd vanish again. "Yes, Dad. I knew I'd find you one day," Emily said, her voice filled with a childlike certainty that contrasted with the harshness of her appearance. Michael finally touched her, his large hands cradling her small face. Her skin was rough, sunburned, and he could feel how much weight she'd lost. Unable to hold back, he pulled her into a desperate hug, as if trying to merge their bodies so he'd never lose her again. "Where were you? Where have you been all these years?" He sobbed into her hair, which smelled of the streets, of dirt, of abandonment. "Close by, Dad." "Always nearby," she replied, her thin arms wrapped around her father's neck. Union Square was now full of people watching, some filming with their phones, others whispering about the drama unfolding before their eyes. But Michael saw nothing but his daughter in his arms, heard nothing but her breathing, felt nothing but the overwhelming relief of having her back. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Among the onlookers crowding around, a middle-aged woman dressed elegantly stood out. She appeared to be in her 50s, with well-kept blonde hair tied in a sophisticated bun, wearing a navy blue pantsuit that screamed money. She watched the scene with an expression mixing surprise and something harder to decipher. It was Catherine Thompson, Michael's older sister. "Michael," she called, slowly approaching. "What's happening here?" The businessman lifted his eyes, still holding Emily against his chest. When he saw his sister, his face twisted into a mix of joy and wariness. "Catherine, it's her. It's Em. She's back," he said, his voice still choked. Catherine's eyes widened, bringing a hand to her chest in a theatrical gesture. "It can't be. How is this possible?" she murmured, stepping closer. "Emily? Is it really you, sweetheart?" The girl shrank slightly in her father's arms as her aunt approached. Something in her, a primal instinct honed by years on the streets, made her wary, but she just nodded, trying to be polite. "Where have you been all these years, my dear?" Catherine asked, reaching out to touch her niece's face. Emily instinctively pulled back, hiding deeper in her father's embrace. Michael felt his daughter's tension and held her tighter, his eyes meeting his sister's with a protective look. "She just found me, Catherine. Let's go home first, then we'll talk," he said, standing up and lifting Emily into his arms. Of course," Catherine quickly agreed. "She must be starving, poor thing. Michael, are you sure it's her? I mean, after all this time?" "I'm sure," he cut in firmly. "She's my daughter." Catherine watched the pair with a calculating gaze. She knew her brother well and understood he was completely vulnerable at that moment. 5 years searching for his daughter had left Michael obsessed, spending fortunes on private investigators, traveling the entire country chasing any lead. Now, with the girl back, he would do anything to protect her. "I'll come with you," she decided. "Emily will need medical care, new clothes, and you, my brother, are too shaken to handle all this alone." Michael hesitated. On one hand, he knew his sister was right about the practical needs. On the other, something about her insistence unsettled him. But Emily whispered in his ear that she was hungry, and that was enough to make him accept any help available. "All right, but let's take it slow with her, Catherine. She must be traumatized." On the way to the car, Catherine bombarded her niece with seemingly affectionate questions, but Emily answered only in monosyllables, staying close to her father. She briefly explained that her mother had left long ago, that she'd lived with a woman named Mrs. Wilson, who took care of several children. But now she was alone because the woman had fallen ill. "And how did you know that man was your father?" Catherine asked, forced sweetness in her voice. "I always knew it was him," Emily replied simply. "I waited for him to pass by the square every day." Michael's heart clenched at the thought that his daughter had been watching him for so long without him even realizing. How many times had he walked by there, buried in his phone, ignoring the children begging for spare change? How many times had he been so close to her without knowing? Michael Thompson's house was in the city's upscale neighborhood, a modern 2-story building surrounded by a well-kept garden. When they arrived, Emily looked around with wide eyes, as if she were seeing a palace. She hesitated at the door, intimidated by the grandeur of the place. "It's your home, little one," Michael said softly, scooping her up in his arms again. "Our home." Inside, the housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, a woman in her 60s who had worked for the family since before Emily was born, nearly fainted at the sight of the girl. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face as she covered her mouth with her hands. "Good Lord! Is that our little Em?" she whispered, stepping closer slowly. "Hi, Mrs. Jenkins," Emily said timidly, remembering the woman who always sneaked her cookies behind her mother's back. Mrs. Jenkins broke down sobbing, reaching out for the girl. Unlike her reaction to her aunt, Emily let the housekeeper hug her, breathing in the familiar scent of cinnamon and warmth that always seemed to surround the woman. "My girl, how you've grown, and how thin you are," Mrs. Jenkins murmured, running her hands over the child's slender arms. "I'll make your favorite food right away. Do you still like mac and cheese?" Emily nodded, a genuine smile appearing on her face for the first time. Michael watched the interaction with tears in his eyes, noticing how differently his daughter responded to people who truly cared for her. "Catherine, I'll give her a bath, and then we can talk," Michael said, turning to his sister, who stood watching with her arms crossed. "Of course, but Michael, don't you think we should call a doctor and maybe notify the authorities? A child missing for 5 years." "No," he cut in, more firmly than he intended. "First, I'm going to take care of my daughter," The paperwork can wait. Catherine raised her eyebrows, clearly disapproving of her brother's decision, but she didn't push further. She said goodbye with a kiss on Emily's cheek. The girl flinched slightly again at the touch, and promised to return the next day to help with the necessary arrangements. When they were alone, Michael took Emily to her old room. Everything was exactly as it had been 5 years earlier. The pink bed sheets, the stuffed animals neatly arranged on the shelf, the children's books, the dolls. He had turned the room into a kind of shrine, cleaning it religiously every week in the hope that one day his daughter would return. Emily stepped in slowly, touching each object with reverence as if revisiting a distant dream. "You kept everything," she murmured, picking up a rag doll from the bed. "I always knew you'd come back," Michael replied, swallowing the lump in his throat. The bath was both revealing and painful. When Emily took off her dirty clothes, Michael could see just how thin she was, her ribs visible, small bruises scattered across her body, telling the story of a harsh life on the streets. He had to step out of the bathroom for a few minutes to compose himself, anger and guilt burning in his chest. How had he failed so completely to protect his daughter? How had she survived alone all these years? What kind of father was he, unable to stop a 7-year-old child from simply vanishing from his life? When he returned, Emily was in the bathtub playing with the rubber ducks that were still there, and for a moment he could see the child she still was beneath all the toughness she'd learned on the streets. "Dad," she said softly, "why did Mommy leave?" The question hit Michael like a punch to the gut. How could he explain the horrors of a bitter divorce to a child? How could he explain that her mother had disappeared with her one December night, leaving only a cruel letter saying he would never see them again because he didn't deserve to be a father? "Mom was very confused back then," he said carefully. "Sometimes adults do wrong things when they're confused." "She didn't want to stay with me either," Emily said with devastating matter-of-factness. "She said I was a burden." Michael closed his eyes, feeling his daughter's pain as if it were his own. How many more painful revelations were yet to come? What kind of traumas had this child faced alone? After her bath, dressed in one of the old nightgowns that still fit her, Emily sat at the kitchen table to eat the mac and cheese Mrs. Jenkins had made. She ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a treasure, and Michael realized she was trying not to show how desperately hungry she was. "You can eat as much as you want, sweetheart. There's more in the pot," he encouraged. "I know," she said, but continued eating with the same measured restraint. "I just learned I shouldn't eat everything at once, or I might get sick later." The sentence revealed more about years of deprivation than any explanation could. Michael sat beside her, watching every movement, every expression, trying to memorize every detail of this daughter he had lost and found again. "Em, where were you living before you found me?" he asked gently. "Someplace near the bus station," she answered between bites. "Had a roof that didn't leak too much when it rained." "And Mrs. Wilson, the one you mentioned?" Emily's face darkened slightly. "She took care of a bunch of kids, but not very well. Sometimes there wasn't enough food for everyone. When she got sick, we all had to fend for ourselves." Michael felt anger rising in his chest but kept his voice calm. "And how did you manage?" "Asking for food in the square, singing sometimes." "People liked my voice," she said, with a childlike pride that broke her father's heart. "You sang for people?" "That song you taught me, the Itsy Bitsy Spider. People always gave me a few quarters when I sang." Michael remembered how he used to sing that silly song with his daughter during bath time when she was little. Knowing she had used that memory to survive on the streets was both touching and devastating. After dinner, they sat in the living room. Emily explored everything with her eyes, touching the furniture, the curtains, the cushions, as if to make sure it was all real. When she reached the bookshelf, she stopped in front of a photo frame showing a family picture taken 3 days before everything fell apart. "I remember that day," she said softly. "Mom said we were taking a pretty picture for Dad to keep." "I've carried this photo in my wallet ever since," Michael said, pulling it out to show the same image, now faded from handling. Emily smiled, touching the photo gently. "You got old," she observed with the blunt honesty of children. Michael laughed for the first time in years, a genuine laugh that seemed to ease some of the pain in his chest. 5 years searching for you gave me some grey hairs, I admit. I changed too, she said, looking at herself in the wall mirror. But inside, I'm still the same M. In that moment, Michael realized that despite all the pain and suffering, despite the lost years and the traumas endured, his daughter's sweet essence had survived. It gave him a hope he hadn't felt in a long time. When it was time for bed, Emily hesitated at the bedroom door. "Dad, can you stay here till I fall asleep?" she asked, with a vulnerability she rarely showed. "Of course, little one. I can stay here all night if you want." She lay down on the bed that had been hers 5 years ago, pulling the sheets up to her chin. Michael sat in the chair beside her, watching his daughter's face slowly relax. "Dad?" she said when the lights were already off. "Yes?" "I knew you'd find me one day." "I always knew." "How did you know?" "Because I felt it here," she said, placing her hand on her chest. "When things got really bad, I'd close my eyes and feel you looking for me. And then I knew I just had to wait a little longer." Michael felt the tears return, but this time they were tears of gratitude. His daughter had survived, fueled by the hope of their reunion, by the unshakable certainty that he had never given up on her. And she was right. He had never given up, not even for a single day. The next morning, Michael woke up in the chair beside his daughter's bed, his neck stiff but his heart lighter than it had been in years. Emily was still fast asleep, and he could see how much more childlike she looked when relaxed, without the constant tension she carried when awake. Mrs. Jenkins knocked softly on the door, bringing coffee and letting him know he had a visitor. "It's Mrs. Catherine," the housekeeper whispered. "She says she has an important proposal for you." Michael sighed, not wanting to leave his daughter alone, but knowing he had to deal with the practical side of things. He carefully tucked Emily in and went downstairs to meet his sister in the living room. Catherine was dressed elegantly, as always, and had brought several bags of children's clothes. "Good morning, Michael. I brought some things for Emily. Clothes, shoes, toiletries," she said, kissing her brother's cheek. "Thank you, Catherine. That was very kind of you." "It's the least I can do for my niece," she replied, sitting down and crossing her legs gracefully. "But I came here to talk about something serious, Michael." "What is it?" "You need to think clearly about this situation. A child who's lived on the streets for 5 years, she's going to need much more than affection and good intentions." Michael tensed immediately. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying maybe you should consider letting her stay with me for a while. I have more experience with children. My home is better equipped. And well, you're clearly too emotionally shaken to make rational decisions." "Catherine, she's my daughter. She just came home." "Exactly," she insisted, leaning forward. "You're so desperate to make up for lost time that you're not seeing the practical problems. This girl will need psychological, medical, and educational support. Do you have time for all that with your business?" Michael felt his irritation growing. There was something about his sister's insistence that deeply unsettled him, but he couldn't quite place it. "I'll make time. I'll cut back on my schedule, hire the best professionals." "Michael, be realistic. You can barely take care of yourself. For the last 5 years, you've been obsessed, a workaholic, throwing yourself into work to escape the pain. How are you going to change all that overnight?" Before he could answer, Emily appeared at the top of the stairs, still in her nightgown, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Dad? Who are you talking to?" "Your Aunt Catherine, sweetheart. Come down and say hello." Emily descended slowly, clearly uncomfortable with her aunt's presence. When Catherine stood to hug her, the girl allowed it, but showed no warmth. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" Catherine asked with exaggerated sweetness. "I did," Emily replied flatly. "That's wonderful. Look, I brought some clothes for you. Why don't we try them on?" "No thanks," Emily said quickly. "The clothes I have are fine." "Emily, don't be rude," Michael gently scolded. "Aunt Catherine is being kind." The girl looked at her father with an unreadable expression, then at her aunt, and finally nodded reluctantly. "All right," she murmured. Catherine smiled, but Michael noticed the smile didn't reach her eyes. Such a polite girl. I'm sure we'll get along just fine in time. Throughout the day, more people began to arrive. Curious neighbors who had heard about the reunion, a local reporter wanting to cover the story, and even some authorities looking into how a child could go missing for 5 years without an active police report. Each visit left Emily more tense, and Michael realized she was overwhelmed by all the attention. He decided to cancel all further visits and focus solely on caring for his daughter, but Catherine insisted it was a mistake. You can't isolate her from the world, Michael. She needs to readjust to society. She needs to feel safe first, he countered. And she'll feel safe with me, Catherine insisted. Michael, think about what's best for her, not what's best for you. The words hit Michael like a slap. It was exactly the kind of emotional manipulation his ex-wife used to use, making him question his own instincts as a father. But this time, he wouldn't let himself be swayed. What's best for her is staying with her father, he said firmly. Catherine sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. Fine, but when things get complicated, and they will, remember I offered to help. She left shortly after, leaving behind the bags of clothes and an uneasy tension in the air. Michael went upstairs to find Emily sitting on the bed, clutching her rag doll. You don't like Aunt Catherine? He asked directly. Emily hesitated, clearly debating whether to be honest. She seems nice, she finally said, but I don't trust her. Why not? I can't explain it. It's just a feeling here, she said, touching her stomach. On the streets, I learned to sense when people weren't trustworthy, and she has a bad smell. A bad smell. Not a real smell, a lying smell. Some people have it. Michael was struck by his daughter's sharp intuition. Her years on the streets had given her a knack for reading people that most adults lacked. What about me? What's my smell? He asked, curious. Emily smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. You smell like home, like safety, like a real dad. In the days that followed, father and daughter slowly began rebuilding their bond. Michael cancelled all work meetings and devoted himself entirely to Emily. They spent mornings talking about the lost years, afternoons playing in the garden, and evenings reading her favorite books. Emily gradually relaxed, showing more of the child she still was. She laughed at her father's silly jokes, asked him to sing old songs, and little by little, she reclaimed some of the mannerisms Michael remembered from when she was small. But not everything was easy. Emily still had frequent nightmares, waking up screaming in the middle of the night. She hid food in her room, stashing bread and cookies under the bed, just in case. And there were moments when she simply shut down, staring blankly with a distant look that broke her father's heart. She needs professional help, Catherine insisted during one of her daily visits. These are clear signs of trauma, and you, Michael, aren't equipped to handle this. Michael knew his sister was right about the need for professional help, but something about how she framed it always felt like an attack on his ability as a father. I've already scheduled an appointment with a child psychologist, he said. Dr. Jennifer Carter. She specializes in trauma cases. That's good, said Catherine, but her expression didn't seem pleased. What about school? Emily missed 5 years of formal education. We'll take that slow too. First, she needs to feel safe and stable. Michael, you're being overprotective. That's not healthy for either of you. Before he could respond, Emily rushed into the room, clearly upset. Dad, there's a man outside taking pictures of the house, she said, hiding behind him. Michael stood up immediately and went to the window. Outside, a photographer with a professional camera was positioned on the sidewalk, clearly trying to capture images through the windows. Son of a... He started but stopped himself because of his daughter. It's the press, said Catherine, joining him at the window. I warned you this would happen. Your story has spread through town. Everyone wants to know about the girl who came back out of nowhere. Michael felt his daughter trembling behind him, and his anger grew exponentially. Emily, go up to your room and close the curtains, he instructed with forced calm. Dad, are they going to take me away? She asked in a small voice. No one's taking you anywhere, he assured her, crouching to her level. I promise. After Emily went upstairs, Michael stepped outside and confronted the photographer directly. "What do you think you're doing?" "It's a public space, sir. I have every right to be here," the man replied arrogantly. "But you don't have the right to photograph a child without permission. If I see you here again, I'll call the police." "The story's already online, sir. The girl who was missing for 5 years. People want to know more." Michael's stomach turned. The last thing he wanted was for his daughter to become a public spectacle. "There's no story here, just a father who got his daughter back. Now get out of here." The photographer left grumbling, but Michael knew others would come. The privacy he valued so much was being invaded, and it was scaring Emily even more. When he went back inside, he found Catherine comforting her niece in the living room. "There, sweetheart. Nothing's going to happen to you," she said gently. "Auntie's here to protect you." "And so am I," said Michael, stepping closer. "Of course," Catherine agreed quickly. "But Michael, you need to think of practical solutions. These reporters won't give up easily. Maybe it'd be better if Emily stayed at my place for a few days until things calm down." "No," Emily said immediately, clinging to her father's arm. "I want to stay here." "Emily, honey, sometimes we have to do things we don't want to for our own good," Catherine insisted. "She said she wants to stay here," Michael cut in, "and that's where she'll stay." Catherine sighed deeply, clearly frustrated with her brother's resistance. "Fine, but when things get worse, and they will, don't say I didn't warn you." That night, Michael had a serious talk with Emily about the situation. "Sweetheart, some people will try to separate us. They'll say it's for your own good that I don't know how to take care of you properly." "Are they lying?" Emily asked bluntly. "I believe so. I think some people have their own interests disguised as concern. What are we going to do?" "We'll stay together no matter what. Do you trust me?" "I do," she said without hesitation. "More than anyone in the world." "Then we'll face this together, okay?" "Okay, Dad." But things got more complicated the next day when a social worker showed up at the door accompanied by Catherine. "Mrs. Nancy Foster from Child Protective Services," the woman introduced herself, a stern-looking lady around 50 years old. "I'm here to assess the situation regarding the minor Emily Thompson." Michael felt his blood run cold. "An assessment? Who requested this?" "It was an anonymous report," Nancy explained, glancing at her clipboard. "Someone mentioned that a child who had been missing for 5 years is being kept at home without proper medical or psychological follow-up." "That's a lie," Michael said, but his voice came out harsher than he intended. "Mr. Thompson, please stay calm. I'm only here to ensure the child's well-being." Catherine stood a step behind the social worker, wearing an expression of false concern that immediately made Michael suspect who had made the report. "Where is the girl?" Nancy asked. "Playing in the garden," Michael replied reluctantly. "May I speak with her?" Michael couldn't refuse without seeming like he was hiding something. He called for Emily, who came running but stopped abruptly when she saw the stranger in the room. "Hi, Emily. My name is Nancy and I work with children. Can I ask you a few questions?" Emily looked at her father, who gave her an encouraging nod, then back at the social worker. "Okay," she said softly. "Are you feeling happy here at home?" "I am." "Is your father taking good care of you?" "Yes." "And do you remember where you were before coming here?" Emily hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the question. "I remember." "Can you tell me?" "I lived on the streets," she said simply. Nancy jotted something on her clipboard, making Michael tense up even more. "How did you survive on the streets?" "By asking for food, singing for people." "Did anyone ever hurt you?" "Sometimes," Emily admitted, and Michael's heart clenched. "What kind of hurt?" "Bad people who didn't like kids on the street, but I was fast at running." Nancy continued asking questions for a few more minutes, and Michael realized she was piecing together a picture of the situation. When she finished speaking with Emily, she asked to talk to him privately. "Mr. Thompson, the situation is complex. A child who spent 5 years living on the streets certainly needs specialized care." "I've already scheduled an appointment with a psychologist," he said quickly. "That's good, but it might not be enough. There are protocols to follow when a missing child is found." "What kind of protocols?" "First, full medical exams to check her health. then a psychological evaluation to assess the extent of any trauma, and an investigation into how and why she went missing in the first place. And in the meantime, it might be best for her to stay in a controlled environment. A shelter, Michael asked, horrified. Or with relatives who are better equipped to care for her, Nancy said, glancing meaningfully at Catherine. She is well cared for here, Michael insisted. Mr. Thompson, from what I understand, you work long hours, you're single, and you're clearly emotionally shaken. That's not a criticism, it's just the reality of the situation. I can take care of my daughter. I'm sure your intentions are the best, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes we need structure, specialized support. Catherine chose that moment to speak up. Nancy, if I may suggest, I could be a suitable alternative. I have experience with children, my home is better equipped, and Emily is my niece. It would be temporary, of course, just until the evaluations are completed. That's a possibility we should consider, Nancy agreed. No, Michael said firmly. My daughter stays with me. Mr. Thompson, I'll be frank with you. If we can't reach an agreement here, I'll have to follow official protocols. And this could mean a court order for temporary removal of the child. Michael felt his world collapse. He had just reunited with his daughter after 5 years, and now they were threatening to separate them again. Can I have a few days to get things in order? He asked. 3 days, said Nancy. In 3 days, I want to see concrete evidence that the girl is receiving proper care. Otherwise, I'll have to take action. After the social worker left, Michael sank heavily onto the couch, his head in his hands. Catherine approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. Michael, I know this is hard, but maybe she's right. Maybe I could take care of Emily for a few months, just until you get back on your feet. Catherine, please, not now. I'm just trying to help. You know I love Emily as if she were my own. I know. But she is my daughter, and I won't give up on her again. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, after Catherine left, Michael talked to Emily about what had happened. Sweetheart, some people think it might be better if you stayed with Aunt Catherine for a little while. Emily's face immediately twisted in distress. Why? Did I do something wrong? No, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just complicated to explain. Dad, I don't want to stay with Aunt Catherine, she said with unusual firmness. There's something about her that makes me feel bad. What kind of thing? Emily hesitated, as if searching for the right words. Remember when I talked about people who smell like lies? Aunt Catherine has a really strong smell of lies. And there's something else. What? I think I've seen her before. Before you found me. Michael straightened, alert. What do you mean? I don't remember clearly, but there's something, like a bad dream you almost forget. Emily, this is really important. You need to try to remember where you saw Aunt Catherine. I'll try, she promised. But Dad, promise you won't send me to her house. I promise I'll do everything I can to avoid that. That's not enough, she said with a seriousness that struck him. I need you to promise you'll fight for me no matter what. I promise, sweetheart, I'll fight for you to the end. The next morning, Michael called Dr. Jennifer Carter and explained the urgency of the situation. The psychologist agreed to conduct an emergency evaluation that same day. Mr. Thompson, I understand your concern, she said over the phone. I'll prepare a full report that can help your case. Michael also scheduled a full medical checkup for Emily and began gathering all the necessary documentation to prove he was providing proper care for his daughter. During the session with the psychologist, Emily was cooperative but cautious. Dr. Jennifer was a woman in her 40s, with a gentle yet professional manner that quickly put the girl at ease. Emily, I'm going to ask you some questions, but there are no right or wrong answers, okay? The psychologist explained. Okay. How do you feel at home with your dad? Safe, she answered without hesitation. And before, when you lived on the streets, how did you feel? Scared, hungry, cold, alone. Do you have nightmares? I do, but not as much as before. What are the nightmares about? About people trying to take me away from my dad again. Dr. Jennifer took careful notes, then ran a few simple tests to assess Emily's cognitive and emotional development. "Mr. Thompson," she said when they finished, "may I speak with you privately?" They stepped into another room, leaving Emily playing with some therapeutic toys. "Doctor, I'll be direct. Emily shows clear signs of trauma, which is completely expected given her history. But she also displays exceptional resilience and a very strong bond with you. Is that good?" "It's excellent. In my professional opinion, separating her from you at this time would be extremely harmful to her recovery process." Michael felt an immense relief. "Can you put that in a report?" "Certainly. I'll prepare a detailed document recommending that Emily remain in your care with regular psychological follow-ups. Doctor, can I ask you something? Emily said she thinks she's seen my sister before but can't remember where. Is that possible?" Dr. Jennifer seemed intrigued. "Trauma can cause fragmented or repressed memories. It's possible she has partial memories she can't fully access yet. How can we help her remember?" "With care and patience. Forcing traumatic memories can be harmful, but with time and proper support, they may surface naturally." When they left the office, Michael felt more confident about the battle ahead. At least now he had a respected professional on his side, but his hopes were shaken when they got home and found Catherine waiting in the living room, accompanied by a man Michael didn't know. "Michael, this is Ati William Parker, a family law specialist," Catherine introduced. The man stood up, extending his hand with a professional smile. "Dr. Thompson, your sister came to me because she's concerned about your daughter's situation." "What situation?" asked Michael, instantly suspicious. "A child who spent 5 years in a vulnerable state needs specialized care. Your sister is willing to request temporary custody to ensure Emily gets everything she needs." "She's getting everything she needs here," said Michael, trying to stay calm. "Dr. Thompson, I'll be frank. Your sister told me about your obsession over the last 5 years, how work consumed your life, how you isolated yourself socially. These aren't ideal conditions for raising a traumatized child. And Catherine has those conditions. She has proven experience with children, a prepared home, full-time availability, and most importantly, she lacks the emotional component that could cloud judgment." "The emotional component of being her father." "Exactly. Sometimes, paternal love can lead to emotional rather than rational decisions." Michael looked at his sister, who watched him with an expression of false compassion. "Catherine, is this what you want? To take my daughter from me?" "Michael, I want what's best for Emily. And right now, what's best for her is stability, professional care, and an environment without the emotional pressure you're putting on her." "What emotional pressure?" "The pressure to heal your paternal wounds, the pressure to make up for 5 lost years. That's too much weight for a child who's already suffered so much." Catherine's words hit Michael like knives. There was enough truth in them to make him question his own motives, but something still felt fundamentally wrong about the whole situation. "Dr. Thompson," the lawyer continued, "we'll file the petition tomorrow. You can present your defense, of course, but I want you to know we have a strong case. Based on what? 5 years of neglect that led to the child's disappearance, documented emotional instability, lack of proper structure to care for a traumatized child, and most importantly, a viable and loving alternative in your sister." "5 years of neglect," repeated Michael, disbelieving. "I wasn't neglectful. My ex-wife took my daughter away." "That will be for the court to decide," said the lawyer calmly. "For now, I strongly recommend you consider our proposal. A legal battle could be very traumatic for the child." After they left, Michael sat on the living room floor, completely devastated. Emily came down the stairs, where she had been listening to the conversation, and sat beside him. "Daddy, are they going to take me away?" she asked in a small voice. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I'll fight with everything I've got." "What if they win?" Michael looked into his daughter's eyes and saw the same fear that was eating him alive. "If they win, I'll keep fighting until you come back home." "Promise." "I promise." Emily nestled into her father's embrace, and they stayed like that for a long time, both trying to accept the reality that they might be separated again. That night, Michael barely slept. He lay awake planning strategies, trying to understand how things had come to this. He had just gotten his daughter back, only to realize he might lose her again, this time to his own sister. Around 3 in the morning, he heard Emily crying in her room. When he went to check, he found her sitting on the bed, clutching her rag doll. "Bad dream?" he asked softly. "No, I was thinking." "About what?" "Aunt Catherine. I think I remembered where I saw her before." Michael sat on the bed, fully alert. "Where?" "It was a long time ago. I was with Mommy, and Aunt Catherine came to our house. They talked in the kitchen, but I heard some things." "What did you hear?" "Aunt Catherine said you didn't deserve to have a daughter, that I'd be better off away from you." Michael felt his blood run cold. "Are you sure about that?" "Yes, and there's more. Aunt Catherine gave Mommy money, a lot of money, and then Mommy acted really strange, and a few days later we left." "Emily, this is very serious. Are you absolutely sure about what you're saying?" "Yes, Daddy. Aunt Catherine is the one who made Mommy take me away from you." A mix of rage and shock surged through Michael so intensely that he had to stand up and pace the room to calm down. His own sister had conspired to destroy his family. She had paid his ex-wife to disappear with Emily. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "I wasn't sure if it was a real memory or just a bad dream, but today, seeing her talk to that man, seeing how badly she wants to take me to her house, I'm sure now." "Sweetheart, would you be brave enough to repeat this to other people? To a judge, if you had to?" Emily nodded with a determination that impressed Michael. "If it means staying with you, I'd be brave enough for anything." Michael hugged his daughter, feeling both pride for her courage and horror at his sister's betrayal. Now he understood why Catherine was so insistent on taking Emily. It wasn't genuine love for her niece. It was guilt and fear of the truth coming out. The next day, Michael sought out a family law attorney. Attorney Richard Miller was well known in town for his skill and integrity, and when Michael told him the story, the lawyer looked visibly outraged. "If what your daughter is saying is true, we're dealing with a case of parental alienation conspiracy. That's a crime. How do we prove it? First, we'll record a detailed statement from Emily. Then we'll investigate your sister's financial transactions around the time of the disappearance. If she really paid your ex-wife, there should be a trail. What about the case she's trying to file? We'll get ahead of it. We'll file our own motion first, requesting a protective order to prevent the child's removal and an investigation into your sister's conduct." Michael left the office feeling more hopeful, but also more determined than ever. This was no longer just about keeping his daughter. It was about justice. When he got home, he found Catherine once again in the living room, this time accompanied by social worker Nancy. "Michael, I brought Nancy to do a new evaluation," said Catherine with a forced smile. "Mr. Thompson," Nancy said, "I've received some additional information about the case that concerns me." "What information?" "About emotional instability, obsessive behavior, and possible neglect that may have contributed to the child's initial disappearance." Michael looked at his sister, realizing she was actively trying to undermine him. "Where did this information come from?" "From a reliable source close to the family," Nancy replied evasively. "Nancy," Catherine interjected, "perhaps it would be best to speak with Emily to understand how she really feels about the situation." "I agree," said Nancy. Emily was called in, and Michael noticed she was nervous but determined. "Emily," Nancy said, "I need to ask you some difficult questions, okay?" "Okay. Do you feel safe here with your father?" "I do. And how would you feel about living with your aunt for a while?" "Bad," Emily answered without hesitation. "Why?" Emily looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "Because I don't trust her." "Why don't you trust her?" "Because she was the one who made my mother take me away from my dad 5 years ago." The silence in the room was deafening. Nancy stopped writing and looked directly at Emily. "Can you explain that further?" "I saw Aunt Catherine give money to my mum, a lot of money, and she said my dad didn't deserve to have a daughter." Catherine visibly paled. That's absurd. A traumatized child can create false memories. It's not a false memory, Emily said firmly. I remember everything. Do you want me to tell you more details? Emily, Nancy said, clearly shaken, this is a very serious accusation. I know, but it's true. Nancy turned to Catherine, who was visibly rattled. Mrs. Thompson, do you have anything to say about these allegations? It's impossible. A 7-year-old can't have reliable memories of something like that. But I wasn't 7 when I saw it, Emily said calmly. I was 6, and I remember because it was the day my life turned upside down. Michael watched the scene with a mix of pride for his daughter's courage and shock at the confirmation of his sister's betrayal. Nancy, he said, I think we need to reassess who really has my daughter's best interests at heart. Nancy closed her clipboard, clearly disturbed by the revelations. Mr. Thompson, I'll need to investigate these claims further before making any decisions about the child's situation. Of course, and while you investigate, my daughter stays with me. For now, yes, Nancy agreed, casting a suspicious glance at Catherine. After they left, Michael knelt in front of his daughter. Emily, you were very brave today. I just told the truth. And the truth can be dangerous sometimes. Do you understand that? I do. But lying would be more dangerous. If I didn't tell the truth, she might have taken me away from you again. Michael hugged his daughter, impressed by her maturity and determination. Now we'll have to prove what you said is true. How? My lawyer will investigate, and you'll have to tell your story to a judge. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. But we'll face this fear together, okay? Okay, Dad. In the days that followed, things moved quickly. Attai Miller obtained a court order to investigate Catherine's financial transactions around the time of Emily's disappearance. The results were devastating. Michael, the lawyer said over the phone, we found significant bank transfers from your sister's account to your ex-wife in the days leading up to the disappearance. And more. We found records that your sister rented an apartment in another state under your ex-wife's name. She planned everything, murmured Michael, still shocked by the extent of the betrayal. Yes, and there's more. We managed to locate your ex-wife. She's willing to testify in exchange for immunity. She's alive? She is. And apparently she carries a tremendous guilt for what she did. When she found out you two had reunited, she decided to cooperate with the law. Michael felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief to know Emily's mother was alive. Anger at discovering their separation had been a deliberate conspiracy. What happens now? Now your sister is the one who'll have problems. Parental alienation, conspiracy, bribery. And you'll get to keep your daughter. When Michael shared the news with Emily, she didn't seem surprised. I knew the truth would come out, she said simply. How did you know? Because lies are like sandcastles. No matter how pretty they look, the tide always comes and washes them away. Michael was struck by his daughter's wisdom, forged by the difficult years she had endured. A few days later, Catherine showed up at their house, visibly distraught. Michael, I need to talk to you, she said, her hands trembling. We have nothing to talk about. Please, I know I made mistakes, but... Mistakes? Michael exploded. You destroyed my family. You made my daughter live on the streets for 5 years. I didn't know she'd end up on the streets, Catherine sobbed. I thought Rebecca would take good care of her somewhere else. And you thought you had the right to decide that. I thought it would be better for Emily to grow up away from you. Why? Catherine hesitated, clearly wrestling with herself. Because I was always jealous of you, always. You had everything, the business, the perfect family, the beautiful daughter, and I could never have children. I could never find someone who truly loved me. So you decided to destroy what I had? I didn't want to destroy. I wanted Emily to be mine. I thought if Rebecca took her away over time, you'd forget each other, and I could be her mother. Michael looked at his sister with a mix of pity and disgust. Do you even realize the harm you've done? Emily suffered on the streets for 5 years. 5 years. I know, Catherine wailed. And it kills me every day. When I found out you two had reunited, I thought if I could get custody of her, I could make up for what I did. Make up for it? How could you ever make up for 5 years of suffering? I don't know, I just knew I had to try. I needed a chance to be important in her life. Michael shook his head, unable to comprehend his sister's twisted logic. Catherine, you need help, professional help. I know, and I'll get it. But Michael, please don't let this destroy our family completely. Our family? Michael laughed bitterly. You already destroyed our family. Don't say that, we're siblings. Siblings don't do what you did, Catherine cried even harder, but Michael felt no sympathy. His daughter's pain weighed far heavier than any suffering his sister might be feeling. I want to see Emily, Catherine pleaded. I want to apologize to her. No. Please, Michael. At least let me explain. Explain what? How you ruined her childhood. How you nearly made her lose hope of ever finding me again. Let me try to fix it. You can't fix it. You'll never be able to fix it. Catherine left the house in tears, and Michael watched her go without an ounce of compassion. Some betrayals were too great to forgive. In the weeks that followed, the legal proceedings moved swiftly. The testimony of Rebecca, Michael's ex-wife, was devastating for Catherine. She confirmed all the details Emily had reported and provided additional evidence of the conspiracy. Catherine came to me right after the divorce, Rebecca testified. She said Michael wasn't a good father, that Emily would be better off away from him. She offered me a substantial amount to disappear with the girl. And you accepted? The prosecutor asked. Yes, admitted Rebecca, clearly ashamed. I was angry at Michael, broke, and the offer seemed like it would solve my problems. What happened next? Catherine arranged everything. An apartment in another state, fake documents, monthly payments. But after 2 years, I couldn't take the guilt anymore. I left Emily with an acquaintance and disappeared. Weren't you concerned about the child's well-being? I was in a very bad place back then. Addicted to alcohol, depressed, I made terrible choices that haunt me to this day. Emily's testimony was even more striking. At 12 years old, she spoke with a clarity and determination that stunned everyone in the room. Aunt Catherine told my mum that my dad didn't deserve to have a daughter, she stated, and she gave my mum a lot of money to take me away from him. How do you remember that? Asked Catherine's defense attorney. Because it was the day my life turned into a nightmare, Emily replied simply. You never forget the day your life becomes a nightmare. The judge, visibly moved by the girl's testimony, addressed her directly. Emily, where do you want to live? With my dad, she answered without hesitation. Why? Because he never gave up looking for me. Even when everyone said I was gone forever, he kept searching. And because when he looks at me, I see real love, not the kind that wants something in return. The judge's decision was unanimous. Catherine was convicted of parental alienation and conspiracy, lost all rights to Emily, and was ordered to pay substantial damages. Most importantly, Michael retained full custody of his daughter. But the real victory came months later, when Emily finally slept through the night without nightmares. Dad, she said at breakfast, I don't think I'm scared anymore. Scared of what? Scared of losing you again, now I know no one can separate us. Michael smiled, feeling he'd finally given his daughter what she needed most, security. Never again, sweetheart. Never again. They spent the following months rebuilding their relationship, creating new memories to replace the lost years. Emily returned to school, made new friends, and slowly became a normal child again, one who laughed loudly and played without fear. Michael drastically cut back on work to be present for every important moment in his daughter's life. They established new rituals, breakfast together every morning, Sunday walks in the park, Friday movie nights. Dad, Emily said during one of those movie nights, are you happy? Very happy. Why? Because I want you to be happy. You suffered so much looking for me. And every second of that suffering was worth it, Michael said, kissing the top of her head. Really? Really? Because it led me back to you. A year after their reunion, father and daughter stood in the same square where it all began. Emily had suggested the visit. saying she wanted to thank the place that brought them back together. "Dad, remember the 3 words I said to you here?" "I do." "Daddy, it's me. I want to say 3 different words now." "What are they?" Emily looked into her father's eyes with all the love a child could hold. "I love you." Michael felt the tears return, but this time they were tears of pure happiness. "I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the words in the world could ever say." They walked hand in hand through the square, father and daughter reunited forever, having overcome the greatest trial life had placed in their path. Love had conquered betrayal, truth had conquered lies, and family had conquered those who tried to destroy it. On Emily's nightstand, beside the rag doll that had comforted her on the hardest nights, there was a new photo, father and daughter smiling, taken on the day justice was served. It was proof that sometimes, when we fight with enough courage, happy endings are possible. And every night before bed, Emily whispered the same 3 words that had changed everything. "Daddy, it's me." No longer a desperate cry for recognition, but a quiet affirmation of belonging, of home, of unconditional love. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your honest words in the comments. Do you think Michael made the right choices? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.